Let's talk more about this with Steve Forbes, the Forbes media chairman, joins us right now. It's really hard to make a case this party after losing the White House and losing control of the Senate is in great shape. But what do you think should be done next? Where should the priorities lie for the Republican Party?
Well, the priority should lie in going to the principles that made the party what it was, a majority party starting with Ronald Reagan. That is low taxes, less regulation, patient control of health care. That's going to be a major issue in the coming months, having patients have more control of health care, having a strong national defense. The party actually did well in the 2020 elections, made real gains in the House of Representatives, legislative elections and governorships and the like. And in the Senate, held the seats that were thought to be vulnerable. The two who were lost in Georgia was a reaction to the what happened after the election with the president. That was not a repudiation of the Republican Party. So the party itself, I think, goes into 2022 in fairly good shape. I don't think the Democrats are going to do a great job of running the economy. They're going to go for more regulation. They're going to start to increase taxes. So the GOP just has to stick to basic principles, and they'll do just fine.
So that's an interesting point you just made about the Georgia race as being a repudiation essentially of the president. The presidential election obviously was as well. And you're right, the Republican Party did gain seats in the House, although they're still in the majority. So does that mean the president himself, and there's been questions about if he has any political future, is pretty much done politically and the party moves on to new leadership over the next few years? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I think the party is looking for new faces. I think there are a lot of candidates who are getting ready for 2024, and I think there'll be even more new faces emerging in 2022. So the bench is good. Republicans are very strong in state legislatures, which mean they'll be in good position to redistrict for the 2022 elections after the census of 2020 becomes official. So the party, if they stick to their moorings, they'll do very well with voters, because voters want to have a chance to have this economy move ahead. And before COVID, this economy was beginning to truly roar.
There have been some suggestions, Steve, even from some Republicans this week, that even though there's 12 days left, and by next week it'll be about a week left in his term, that President Trump should be removed from office. I think we'll see articles of impeachment on the floor of the House next week. If he were to be impeached, removed, and then disqualified, you can make the argument then that that eliminates him as someone who could run again. Would you support the president being removed with such a short time left in his term? Do you think it's a good idea?
The Wall Street Journal had a good editorial today saying that an impeachment process is going to be drawn out, bitter, make him look like a martyr. Same thing with trying to invoke the 25th Amendment, which turns out to be much more complicated than people had initially thought. So if he's going to go, it's going to be going on his own volition. The key thing is he really hurt himself, damaged himself, and damaged the country by what happened on Wednesday. Very, very ugly thing. And so his influence, yes, he'll have some influence, but it's not going to be nearly what it was before the November elections. People are very, very discouraged by what happened after the elections. And I think the party wants to move ahead. There are a lot of good leaders out there. I think you're going to see them come to the fore. And I think people are going to be impressed by what many of them are going to be offering in areas like health care and national defense.
Two-part final question. So are you suggesting the president should resign? And B, who are those good leaders that you're talking about? Name a few.
Well, in terms of whether the president's going to resign, I think the key thing is have the next 12 days nothing happen. And I don't think anything is going to happen. The national security team is going to stay in place. The thing that should be is to focus on the future. And when you look out there, you have a number of governors, such as Governor DeSantis of Florida, Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, and we have a number of senators, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, and others out there. And I think more are going to emerge in the 2022 elections. So there'll be plenty of faces out there to run. I think the governor of South Dakota, she's going to be a formidable candidate if she runs in 2024. So I think there are going to be a lot of exciting things happening in the party. And I think the party, especially what's happened this week, the ugly events have happened, what happened this week, wants to move ahead. The past is the past. Some real achievements were achieved in the last 4 years, but we got to move ahead. And I think the people are there to do it. And by the way, another issue is going to be the integrity of the dollar. The Federal Reserve a sound dollar. It's no issue today, but it will be in the next year or so as these trillions flood into the economy. And GOP is going to be good on that issue and not the Democrats.
All right, we'll pick that one up the next few times you're on. It's always good to see you. Steve Forbes with us on a Friday, talking about the future of the GOP.